Yeah, did someone say something?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you would record it because I'll
Yep.
definitely watch this tomorrow.
Yeah. So the way this code is kind of, I won't say it's the old way. But there are some things that can get us run into errors. And this is actually where fat arrow functions versus just regular functions have their benefit. And if we run into some errors, we'll try to do this. We'll try to debug it. So just to recap, reading through state, we have dens and points, and then in dens value is this dot get state, your get den state. If we look down here with the get den state function, it creates an array and maps through that array and returns an is mole visible and with a true or false value. So it's an array of true or false. And depending on, it kind of randomizes whether or not that mole is visible by this math.random. So is mole visible is a Boolean value. So this math random will return a 0 or a 1, which corresponds to whether or not the mole is visible. And then we also have this component did mount, which is a built-in lifecycle method that automatically executes right when the component renders. And once that, so this is always automatically executed, and it runs this .start game, which is an interval. So set interval, which sets the den state resets the den state or updates their state every 1.5 seconds. Then in the render, we have a variable where we map through the dens, the array of dens, grab each den and return a mole component, which is right here. And then we just have, and then we display those moles right here. So if we look over here, let's bring that up, we get this. But so we want to sporadically update the moles. So I'm just going to come over here where it's mapping through and console logging each individual den just to see what we're working with, because we might want to pass data down to this mole component. So if I come over here, notice how we have an is mole visible that updates every 1.5 seconds. So all these are updated. So we get an is mole visible attached to that individual den. So false, true, true. So we can leverage that is mole visible that's on the den and pass it down to the mole component. So I'm going to say is mole visible equals den dot is mole visible. So if I come over here to the mole component, I'm going to console log this dot props just to see what props we're working with. And I have to do that within the render, like so. And I'm going to uncomment out, or I'm going to delete line 36. So we're only console logging what's showing up in the mole. And we should still see the same thing. So every 1.5 seconds, is mole visible gets updated. So we can just use logic here. We can say this dot props is mole visible, which is a Boolean value. So if this is true, we want to render the mole in the thing inside the hole. If it's not, we don't want to display anything. So if we come over here, looks like I need to do, there we go. So is mole visible, like, there we go. So now we actually kind of have a game that's kind of like whack-a-mole. But now what we want to do is be able to pass when I click on the mole, when they're visible, I want to be able to get some points. And if the mole is not visible, I do not want to be able to get points. So if I click on an empty one, I don't get any points. So if I'm looking over here, I see on mole whacked, which updates the points, increases the points by 1. So hopefully I can just say on mole whacked. I can also just call this like on click if I wanted to. And pass that on, I guess I'll call it this dot on mole whacked. So if I come back over here, refresh, now I got this on click. Which is a function, but I could also call that, let's go ahead and call that on mole whacked as well, just to keep things the same. So if I come back and look at, now I get the on mole whacked function. So what I can do is add an on click to this image. So on click event handler that will execute the this dot props. Whoop. This dot props dot on. What is it? On mole whacked function. So if I come over here, on mole whacked, and then when I click on that, let's see what happens. So nothing is happening. Let's see what's going on.
I ran into this issue.
Yep. So does anybody know what's going on?
Are you missing an H and whacked?
Yep, that could be it. Is that what it is? All right, let's see. Let's maybe. Nope, I don't want to go there. All right, let's try this again. So I got, all right, I just got a big error. I'm going to go ahead and comment out or remove that. So let's see what that means. So let's do a refresh, click on that. Okay. Cannot read properties of undefined reading set state. All right, so
Doesn't know
reading,
what this is.
yep, it doesn't know what this is because we're passing this down to another component and it doesn't know where this is coming from. And this is why this is one of the benefits of using fat arrow functions. So fat arrow functions, one of the things it does, it binds wherever you're calling this function, wherever you're invoking this function from, it binds the elements or the attributes or the functions within that function to wherever it was defined. There's a couple of ways we can fix this. We can literally do a dot bind to this. So this on whacked bind to this. So it's binding it to the app component. So when it calls on whacked, it knows what this is. It knows what this is referencing, which is the app component. So it knows that this dot set state is. So if I come back here and do a hard refresh, it's working now. That's one way we can do it. Another way we would used to do it, this is not really a way we do it anymore, but inside the constructor, well, I forgot what it was, props, super, I can't remember, constructor props, constructor react super. All right, okay, yeah. So we used to do super props, and then the constructor function is very similar to that of the dunder init method in Python. So this is always gets called first. And what we can do is, let's go ahead and move state up here. We can run a function this on mole whacked equals this on mole whacked bind this. And if we do that, we don't need to do the bind this down here. We can just call on mole whacked. So if we come back here and run that, everything is still working. Again, but that's a lot of code that we had to write just to get this to work. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to go back to the old way, or how it was originally. I'm going to get rid of that constructor and just have. So right now we still have on mole whacked bind this. I want to get rid of that. I don't want to have to bind anything to any function. That's where fat arrow functions come into play. If I don't want to use bind, just make this a fat arrow function. And it automatically binds it to the context, or it binds it to wherever it was called. So I just converted that into a fat arrow function. Like I'm going to do that. Make that a fat arrow function. Make start game a fat arrow function just because it's going to make my life a lot easier. Component did mount stays the same, is not a fat arrow function. But if I refresh, what did it just do? Get. Let's go back. Should I go back one more? See if this works. I don't want to deal with that because I didn't have to change that if I didn't want to. All right. So the only thing I did was made on mole whacked a fat arrow function. And now everything still works. So when in doubt, if you're defining functions in React, just make them fat arrow functions. All right. If you want, you can also, like here, nothing's preventing me from clicking this multiple times and getting multiple points while that's being shown. You could make an attribute like once it clicks, it might change a value, such as whacked false. And then you can update a state. So when you do click that when on mole whacked, you can also update whacked for that specific instance. But that's up to you. So that's the extent of on or whack-a-mole. Any questions on that? Or what questions do you have?